There is a type of person you have probably encountered at some point in your life. If you have, you remember them clearly, even though, and perhaps especially because, they were not the loudest in the room. They didn't state their intentions. They didn't show confidence or broadcast ambitions. They didn't need the room to know how much they were doing or how well they were doing it. They moved steadily, purposefully, with an economy of motion and a certainty that had nothing to do with volume and everything to do with depth. While others talked about their plans, this person was carrying them out. While others sought validation for their next move, this person had already made it. Down, others celebrated early and loudly. This person was already 3 moves ahead on the board, not from arrogance, but from the discipline of someone who understands that a victory announced before it is complete is at risk. This person grasped something that takes most of us a long time to learn, something our culture of loud, performed, publicly documented achievement has made harder to notice. Quiet victories are often the most meaningful. Noise and achievement are unrelated. The attention a person attracts doesn't reflect the depth of their work. The most important work in any field, thinking, positioning, and patiently building an advantage, often happens quietly. Those who understand this don't broadcast their strategies. They embody them. Today, we are going to explore the art of quiet victory. Not because silence is inherently better than expression, or because there's anything wrong with celebrating what you've built, but because the strategic discipline that leads to quiet victory, patience, precision, playing the long game, and the freedom from needing to be seen at every step is among the most underrated and undertaught skills in modern life. It transforms everything. Let's get started. The issue with loud noises. Let me be honest from the start. I'm not here to tell you that visibility is wrong, that sharing your work is vain, or that ambition should be kept secret. None of those things are true. Visibility matters. Communication matters. Genuine, earned celebration matters. But there is a form of loudness that isn't about communication. It's not about celebration but pre-celebration. Not about sharing but about seeking. Not about expression but about performance. That version, the one that has become the default in a culture obsessed with social documentation and attention metrics, costs more than most people realize. Announcing your goals before achieving them saps the energy they require. This is more than just intuition. It is one of the most consistently replicated findings in motivation psychology, first systematically studied by Kurt Lewin and later verified through multiple independent research efforts. When you tell others about a goal you plan to achieve, 2 things happen at once. The first is clear. You get social recognition. The people you share with respond positively. They affirm you and show that they see you as someone who has or is becoming whatever the goal represents. The second issue is less obvious and far more costly. The brain, which is highly sensitive to social feedback, interprets that acknowledgement as a sign of partial completion. Neurologically, it feels as if some part of the achievement has already been reached because the social reward the achievement was supposed to bring has already been partially given. As a result, the motivation behind the goal, the hunger, the urgency, the burning need to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be is somewhat diminished, slightly satisfied by the announcement. This is why the person who loudly proclaims their goals at the start of each year is rarely the one with the most to show by year's end. The proclamation drains the energy the actual work requires. The performance replaces the practice. The quiet person, who told no one what they were building, who received no early social validation, and who had no performance to maintain, had nothing to spend motivation on except the actual work. As a result, the work got done. Every announcement is a partial arrival. A partial arrival before the real one isn't a preview, it is a leak. The quiet builder understands this instinctively. They protect the energy of the vision by keeping it close, feeding it only with action rather than attention, allowing it to compound in the silence before it is ever presented to the world. Loud exposes your hand. There is a strategic aspect to silence that differs from the psychological one, and it is important to understand this distinction clearly. In any environment where resources are limited, whether it's a competitive market, a professional setting, a creative field, or even a personal relationship with power dynamics, your intentions serve as strategic assets. The things you're building, your positioning, or the moves you're about to make, this information is valuable precisely because not everyone has it. When you reveal your strategy before executing it, you relinquish that advantage. You give the people around you time to respond, position themselves against you, accelerate their own nearby plans, close doors before you get there, and prepare a counter before your move takes effect. The chess player who announces their next move forfeits that move. Not always, sometimes the announcement is itself a strategic gesture meant to provoke a specific response. But that is a sophisticated use of communication as a tool, very different from the usual announcement that stems from the need to be seen and validated. The person who moves quietly reaches their destination before anyone else notices where they're headed, and in a world that's often competitive, whether we admit it or not, timing is everything. Loudness misleads you with incorrect feedback. There is a third cost to the loud approach that may be the most damaging of all because it is the hardest to see. When you share your journey publicly, when the process of building something is documented, shared, and open to social feedback, you often, even unconsciously, start to aim more for the response than for the actual result. Your choices are influenced, at least in part, by what will garner positive feedback rather than solely by what will lead to the best outcome. You choose the more dramatic pivot over the steady, more effective course because it creates a better story. I see you share the milestone that looks impressive rather than the progress that truly matters. You highlight the peaks and fade during the valleys, not out of dishonesty, but because you've become so attuned to external responses that the valleys feel like failures rather than a normal part of any real journey. The quiet builder doesn't face this problem. They lack an audience to cater to and focus only on the work itself. Therefore, every decision is driven by the desired outcome rather than the story behind it. That clarity of purpose, the freedom to prioritize doing what is right over what is merely impressive, is one of the main advantages of working in silence. The nature of strategic thinking. Let's explore this further because a quiet victory isn't just about keeping your goals secret. Silence is the container. What fills it, the real practice of strategic thinking, is the substance. Strategic thinking is a discipline most people have never truly learned. It's not exactly about intelligence. Some of the smartest people I know are surprisingly poor at strategic thinking. It's not just experience either, although experience helps. It's a particular way of perceiving a specific method of understanding your situation that consistently leads to better decisions than typical human instincts. Let me show you how it looks. Strategic thinking begins with the right time horizon. The key difference between strategic and non-strategic thinking is the time frame used to evaluate decisions. Non-strategic thinking assesses decisions primarily on the short term. What does this do for me now? What does it cost me now? How does this look right now? These aren't irrational questions. The short term is real and matters, but it's an incomplete perspective. Choosing actions that benefit the next week, month, or quarter often leads to the wrong choices for the next decade. Strategic thinking intentionally broadens the time horizon. It asks, what will this decision look like 5 years from now? What position will it put me in? What will it cost me over time, not just today? What will it add up to, for better or worse, if I continue making this decision? This shift in time perspective influences nearly every major decision. Investing in a skill with no immediate benefit becomes clearly justified when viewed from 5 years ahead. A comfortable habit that slightly harms your health or relationships Each day becomes undeniably dangerous when viewed over a decade. A relationship worth preserving, even at a cost, becomes evidently valuable when you consider how much it will matter at a crucial future moment. Strategic thinkers are not inherently smarter than others. They consistently focus further into the future. Because of this, they notice things that someone only concerned with tomorrow cannot see. They feel less pressured by this week's noise and have a clearer sense of the direction of this decade. That clarity influences their choices. The person who makes every decision based on next week's outlook and the person who makes decisions with a 10-year perspective are playing different games. They will hold very different positions in 10 years, not because one is more talented, but because one consistently invests in the longer term. Widen your time horizon. Then see how many short-term worries no longer matter. Strategic thinking focuses on systems, not just events. Non-strategic thinking sees life as a series of separate events. They respond to each event as it happens. Each response is judged independently, with little regard for the patterns, structures, or underlying forces that keep causing the same kinds of events. Strategic thinking looks at the system behind events. It asks not just what happened, but what kind of thing keeps recurring. Not just why this situation arose, but what structural conditions keep producing similar situations. Not just how to solve this problem, but how to change the conditions that cause it so the same response isn't needed repeatedly. This distinction lies between being reactive and being proactive. The reactive person constantly solves problems as they arise. The strategic person designs systems that prevent those problems from recurring, creating conditions in which only the issues they want to see arise. Consider this in your own life. Where do recurring problems arise? What patterns keep showing up in different forms? These patterns are rarely random. They usually reflect an underlying factor, a belief, a habit, a relationship dynamic, resource distribution, or a decision-making framework that keeps producing the same results. Strategic thinking identifies that underlying cause and addresses it directly, rather than just managing the symptoms forever. Strategic thinking masters the art of asymmetric positioning. Here is one of the most crucial yet least discussed concepts in strategic intelligence, the principle of asymmetric positioning. Asymmetric positioning involves putting yourself in situations where the potential upside greatly outweighs the potential downside. A win results in a significant gain, while a loss causes only a small one. The structure of the situation itself favors you regardless of the outcome of any specific move within it. This contrasts with how most people make important decisions. Most evaluate choices by weighing potential gains, hoping the rewards outweigh the risks. The strategic thinker analyzes the decision structure and takes risks only when the odds are clearly in their favor. In practical terms, this means selecting positions, relationships, and arenas where your specific strengths give you real advantages most other participants lack, and where your accumulated knowledge, experience, or perspective provides an edge the situation values. It is not about trying to win everywhere, but about being very deliberate about where you compete, choosing the terrain where your advantages stand out most. The strategic thinker doesn't aim to excel at everything. Instead, they focus on being exceptional in the specific areas that matter most within their chosen arena. They select this arena, in part, based on where their unique form of excellence can create the greatest impact. Strategic thinking creates lasting advantages. Perhaps the most powerful idea in strategic thinking is the compound advantage, the accumulation of small, modest edges that, when combined and sustained over time, produce outcomes that seem to arrive suddenly and completely, as if from nowhere. The person who reads 30 minutes more each day than their peers might not seem smarter tomorrow. However, over 5 years, The depth of their knowledge builds an advantage that, to outsiders, looks like natural brilliance. Similarly, someone who maintains one extra key relationship with genuine effort might not seem more connected next month. But over a decade, the trust and goodwill from that relationship compound, opening access and opportunities that outside observers might see as lucky happenstance. A quiet victory is built on compound advantages. It stems from daily, unglamorous decisions to prioritize the long-term edge over short-term rewards. It means reading when others are scrolling, building when others are performing, tending relationships when no immediate effort seems necessary, and refining skills before they are needed. Each investment seems small. The compound return is remarkable because the growth happened quietly without notice, documentation, or visible performance. When it finally emerges, it appears fully developed. To those who did not see the decade of effort behind it, it looks like an overnight success. Every compound advantage starts with a decision that seems too small to be impressive. An extra hour of reading, one more genuine conversation, a skill practiced for 30 minutes beyond comfort. These acts aren't remarkable on their own. Over the years, they accumulate into remarkable people. The quiet builder understands this math. They are always investing in the next compound cycle, long before anyone can see its results. The 7 disciplines of the quiet builder. Theory without practice is just commentary. So let me share the 7 disciplines, the specific, daily, practical habits of mind and behavior that lead to quiet victory in any area. Discipline 1. Safeguard your process from public exposure. The most basic discipline is intentionally shielding your process from premature external judgment. This means resisting the urge, which will be strong because the culture constantly encourages it, to share, document, announce, or perform your work before it is fully developed. Not because your work in progress is shameful, but because this stage is a protected environment, like a greenhouse, where the work evolves according to its own natural logic rather than public opinion. Once external evaluation begins, the work shifts toward what is clear, what is approved, what will garner positive feedback, and away from what is most truthful and essential. The greatest works in any field are usually the ones that remain hidden from the public the longest. Those years of private work. The drafts were kept secret, and the experiments were conducted without documentation. The ideas were developed in margins that no one will ever see. Protect your process. Grant it the gift of privacy. Share the result fully and generously when it is ready. But keep the process yours. It performs best when it is free from observation. Discipline 2. Master the art of proper patient positioning. One of the clearest differences between strategic and non-strategic people is their approach to timing. Non-strategic people tend to act when they feel ready, when they feel confident, when the opportunity seems clear, and when the moment feels right on an emotional level. Strategic people recognize that personal readiness and optimal timing are distinct concepts. They cultivate the discipline, which is genuinely difficult for most, to wait until conditions are as favorable as possible, even when they feel ready to act sooner. Patient positioning involves observing, preparing, and waiting for the right conditions to align, rather than forcing a move in unfavorable circumstances simply because waiting has become uncomfortable. This requires accepting a particular kind of discomfort, being fully prepared without yet taking action. It means watching others make moves and resisting the urge to respond prematurely, trusting that the position you are building during the wait has real strategic value, that the benefit of acting at the right moment far outweighs the downside of delaying. The chess grandmaster perceives not only the current state of the board but also how it will look after several moves. They don't react to each opponent's move in isolation. They follow a plan whose logic spans the entire game. Patient positioning is the human equivalent of that multi-move strategy applied to your life. Discipline 3. Focus on developing deep knowledge instead of shallow performance. In a world that prizes the appearance of expertise, the act of truly developing expertise is quietly revolutionary. There is a huge difference between knowing enough about something to speak about it credibly in a social setting and knowing it well enough to do something genuinely useful with it. The former can be learned quickly and shared broadly. The latter takes years and can't be performed, only demonstrated by what it allows you to do. The quiet builder favors depth over breadth. Not because breadth lacks value, intellectual range is a true asset, but because the biggest advantage that shifts a person's path almost always stems from deep, specific, hard-to-replicate expertise rather than from a broad, shallow, easily matched knowledge base. Deepen your focus on the most important areas for your goals. Study the primary sources, not just summaries. Practice the skill beyond basic competence to master it. Engage in conversations that go beyond the surface to the core substance. Build a kind of knowledge that can't be faked or quickly gained by someone who decides tomorrow they want what you have. That depth is your quietest and most durable competitive advantage. The beautiful thing about it is that it cannot be taken away. It resides within you. It grows stronger every day you use it. And it emerges, when conditions are right, as a capability that appears to outsiders to be extraordinary talent. Depth is the quiet buildup of what truly matters. Every hour spent delving into what matters is an investment in a future self that the superficial performer cannot reach from the outside. Go deep, silently, for as long as needed. The depth will speak for itself in time and in the right circumstances more eloquently than any message could. Discipline 4. Master reading independently. The quiet builder is a sharp, attentive observer of their environment, of the people, the dynamics, the trends, and the emerging opportunities and risks. They constantly gather information, process it carefully, and regularly update their understanding. But they do this with a discretion most people don't practice. They ask more questions than they answer. They reveal their analysis only when it clearly benefits them. They let others underestimate them, because being underestimated is, in almost every strategic situation, a real advantage. The person who is underestimated faces lower expectations, encounters less opposition, and has more freedom to move than the person who is accurately or overestimated. They do not need to defend a position that no one knows they hold. They do not need to protect an advantage that no one knows they have. They can act without friction, surveillance, or the costly effort of managing others' awareness of them. Practice the discipline of carefully and thoroughly reading situations while keeping your perceptions to yourself. This is not deception. It is the natural discretion of someone who understands that not every perception needs to be shared, not every analysis needs to be spoken aloud, and not every advantage needs to be announced to be genuine. Discipline 5. Respond, never react. The single most reliable sign of a non-strategic thinker is a reactive response. It is the immediate, emotionally driven answer to a provocation, setback, challenge, or unexpected event rendered before assessing the strategic implications. Reactive responses nearly always benefit the person who triggers them. The individual who provokes a reaction sets the terms of the interaction. They force you to respond on their terms, on their timeline, and from a place of heightened emotion rather than careful strategy. Every negotiator, every skilled leader, and every experienced participant in any competitive field knows this. Inducing a reactive state in opponents is a key technique. Not reacting is a vital form of defense. The response, unlike the reaction, is born of a pause. A breath, a day, or whatever time the situation allows, during which the emotional intensity of the moment can settle and the strategic mind has a chance to evaluate what is actually happening here. What does this situation demand of me? What response aligns with my true interests, not just my immediate emotions? What move looks 3 steps ahead rather than just one. This discipline is straightforward to explain but difficult to practice because it goes against the natural wiring of evolution, which favors immediate threat responses. However, it is among the most powerful habits across the range of strategic behaviors. The person who can consistently pause before reacting, who has built the ability to fully feel the reactive urge and still choose a different response, possesses one of the rarest and most effective skills. Discipline 6. Focus on building long-term relationships, not just immediate transactions. Non-strategic individuals tend to assess relationships primarily by their immediate usefulness. What does this person offer me right now? What can this connection deliver in the short term? They manage their social capital with a short-term perspective, extracting value from relationships as it arises, rather than patiently investing in long-term compound benefits. Strategic people understand that the most valuable relationships in life are not necessarily those with the highest immediate benefit. Instead, they are those built on a strong foundation, lasting trust, and mutual investment over time. And they understand that the most important relationships in their future are often the ones they are building now with people who are not yet in the positions they will someday hold, in conversations that offer no immediate benefit, and in moments of genuine generosity that are not aimed at gaining something but still yield returns because genuine generosity is uncommon and people remember it. Invest in relationships the way you invest in compound advantages, not transactionally, not with an immediate ROI calculation. Instead, with patience, authenticity, and a long-term perspective. The person who treats every interaction as a potential transaction will gain some value but won't build trust. Conversely, the person who views every interaction as the start of something lasting will, over time, create a relational architecture that no transaction-focused competitor can access or replicate. Discipline 7. Let the work speak for itself. This is the final discipline and, in many ways, the hardest for people raised in a culture of self-promotion to fully accept. It is the discipline of trusting that genuine quality work eventually finds its own visibility. When you pursue excellence consistently and remain patient, it does not stay invisible forever. You don't need to announce your value, you need to live it so fully and consistently that the proof speaks for itself before you even say a word. This requires a level of trust that is truly demanding. The trust that consistently doing the right work in the right way over time yields the right results, even without the constant self-promotion and advocacy that culture often suggests are necessary. The trust that quiet excellence has a kind of gravity, that it draws in the right opportunities, relationships, and recognition, not through noise, but through the simple, powerful truth of its quality. Here is the proof of that trust. Look at the people in any field whose longevity and depth of achievement are most impressive. Notice whose influence truly builds over decades. Almost always you will see a pattern. They weren't the loudest, they were the most consistently excellent. And that excellence sustained quietly, refined without an audience, gradually becomes an unstoppable force. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it is already doing the work that applause can only highlight. Let your work speak for itself. Let the quality of what you build be the thing that introduces you to every room you're meant to enter. This is the highest and final expression of the quiet builder's art, not modesty or concealment, but the absolute, grounded, unhurried confidence that excellence needs no decoration, that the work itself is enough. The texture of a quietly victorious life. I want to paint you a picture, not of an achievement of a way of being, the specific kind of life the disciplines we've discussed have upheld over years and decades. Because the goal of strategic thinking and quiet victory is not to make you more competitive in an obvious way. It is not to create someone who wins more arguments, gains more trophies, or reaches more destinations faster. It is something more complete and more lasting than any of those things. It grants freedom. The person who has mastered the quiet builder's art is free in a way that louder, more performative approaches to life cannot achieve. Free from the exhausting upkeep of a public image that must be constantly refreshed. Free from the anxiety about whether the performance is landing. Free from dependence on external validation as a measure of progress. Free from the reactive urgency that keeps non-strategic people perpetually off balance. This freedom is not the absence of ambition. It is a clear, grounded sense of direction so firm that the noise of other people's opinions and the randomness of circumstances can pass by without affecting you. You know your destination. You've built the foundation. The work is already underway. Nothing about this moment can derail your long-term path. That stability, deep, quiet, earned stability, is one of the greatest qualities a human life can have. It is not something the person who is constantly performing, reacting, or managing their story can access. It's only available to those who go deep rather than wide, slow rather than frantic, quiet rather than loud. It has a real impact. Here's a paradox worth considering. The loudest seekers of recognition often have the least lasting influence, whereas those who quietly pursue authentic quality tend to have the most. Influence, the genuine kind that changes how people think, act, and become, isn't created by visibility. Instead, it comes from the depth of your contribution, the quality of your ideas, the consistency of your judgment over time, and something truly valuable that people trust and keep returning to. That depth of contribution is almost always the result of the disciplines we've discussed: long-term thinking, combined knowledge. The builder is patient, resisting the urge to seek quick applause in favor of lasting quality. The quiet builder, in other words, is not sacrificing influence to preserve integrity. They are choosing the path that creates the most lasting influence, even if it requires more patience and greater tolerance for the invisibility of the building process. It creates a self you can fully inhabit. This is the most personal aspect of what the quiet builder's path creates, and I want to call attention to it because I believe it's the most important in the long run. When you build your life through genuine work rather than performance, through thoughtful choice rather than reactive drift, and through the patient accumulation of what truly matters rather than the frantic pursuit of what only briefly impresses you, ultimately inhabit a self that is fully and authentically yours. It's not a constructed persona you must maintain. It's not a set of achievements you need to cite to understand who you are. Instead, it's a genuine, tested, deeply known self, built through the specific discipline of doing what you believe in, quietly, for as long as it takes. That self does not require external validation. It doesn't need applause to recognize its worth. It doesn't need to compare itself to others' visible achievements, because its sense of value comes from internal knowledge of what was built, how, and at what cost. This internal knowledge, accessible only to those who did the actual work, is the quietest and most unassailable form of self-confidence. The greatest victory you will ever achieve is the one that makes you most truly yourself. Not the loudest, nor the most visible, nor the most recognized, but the most genuine, deepest, and most authentic version of you. The person who created what they created for the right reasons, in the right way, at whatever pace the work truly needed, with no audience but the work itself. That is the quiet victory worth everything. I want to end with something candid. The world won't always make the path we discussed today easy to follow. The culture of noise is real, and its rewards are immediate, visible, and tempting. When someone posts an achievement and gets an instant positive response, while you're quietly working on something that won't be ready to share for months or years, the comparison can feel uncomfortable. The question is, am I missing something? Am I too invisible? Should I be doing more to get noticed? And the honest answer is, sometimes, probably, in specific strategic situations, Yes, visibility serves a purpose, and pursuing it is the right move. Genuine communication, the honest sharing of ideas and progress, and authentic participation in a community are all true goods that silence for its own sake cannot produce. But here is the important distinction to understand. There is a difference between strategic visibility chosen, intentional, and presented when your work is ready to represent you accurately, and the compulsive, anxiety-driven performance of a work in progress, which is really a search for reassurance that you are on the right path. Choose strategic visibility. Refuse compulsive performance. Understand the difference. One supports your work, the other replaces it. And in the meantime, during the quiet, long stretches when the work is underway but not yet finished, when the compound is building but not yet visible, when the position is being established but not yet filled, trust the process, trust the disciplines, trust the mathematics of compound interest and the importance of genuine quality. Here is what I know about the quiet builders, the ones who have walked this path with genuine commitment and patience. They arrive, though not always on the timeline they expected or in the exact form they pictured, but they arrive with depth, solidity, and wholeness that the louder path often lacks, with a self fully inhabited, with victories that are completely theirs, not performed, borrowed, or dependent on anyone else's recognition. The loudest room isn't always where the most important work happens. In fact, it rarely is. The most vital work in any life, at any time, almost always happens in silence. During unhurried thought, in patient building, in private refinement of something that will one day fully develop and speak entirely for itself. That work is yours to do. The quiet is yours to protect. When victory arrives, it will be undeniably, permanently, and completely yours. Start quietly. Create quietly. Let the work speak for itself. And win quietly, profoundly, completely.